Practitioners of this craft, welcome back to this thing of ours. I'm your host, Neil K. Marcellus, and these are the Chronicles of Gameology, and that's checkmate. Speaking of practitioners of the craft, there's a seasoned OG by the name of Player Ham out of Los Angeles, California, who is a hip-hop legend and one of the sickest lyricists to ever bless a mic. But he has a saying that would set the tone for this episode, and it goes, there is only a chosen few who escapes the circle that has many deceived to be a straight line. So here's the deal. This game, this philosophy, it has a tendency to position itself at critical times in an individual's life, offering a grandiose and a commanding obligation, which can be referred to as the call, the called, the chosen, and the nominated. You see, the call of this philosophy, this game, goes out to a chosen few. They are invited to receive its power, but only the courageous is chosen. They presently internalizes this enormous power and its electrifying vigor. They are truly the nominated. What I just got through stating has to do with the title of this show and speaks to the reason on why a man becomes chosen versus being tolerated when it comes to his interactions with the ladies. Here's a major secret that differentiates the concept called game from dating advice and pickup artist techniques. When a man has been properly laced up by a reputable and a seasoned OG, as someone with these kind of credentials is referred to within this street philosophy, then a man who has been properly put on and initiated off of the front porch does not, and I repeat, does not fix his mouth and go around exhibiting thirsty energy and directly asking women for sex, because like I have stated several times before, game from an authentic street perspective, where the term originally originated from, is not about techniques or dating tips on getting sex from females. It's all about securing and getting non-pressurized cooperation from them instead. Which this aspect of this thing of ours, this street philosophy, passed on and taught to other men by seasoned OGs, it's referred to as the catching hand. It is the quintessential method as it pertains to being smooth and savvy when it comes to dealing with the ladies. A distinguishing factor to this way of thinking is a key tenet that encapsulates its essence, and that is the tongue is always mightier than the sword. Also, this knowledge surrounding this concept of the catching hand, it has a strong hustler component intertwined and running through his creed and ideology, especially the extreme and advanced form of his teachings, and his motto is purse first, ass last. But circling back to this subject of cooperation, FYI, there are 4 levels of cooperation that is showcased and demonstrated within the cat and mouse interplay transpiring between the male and female relationship dynamic. That is taught within the study halls of the street philosophy referred to as the catching hand. But more times than not, the basement level, the lowest level from this category, the 4th level, is where a lot of men find themselves and their standings when it comes to their interactions and dealings with the ladies, which equates to being tolerated and being nothing more than a bugaboo. Check out this image I'm currently showing. This basement level, the bottom of the totem pole, as you will, as it pertains to the 4 categories of cooperation. But this lowest level is called the zero tolerance effect. You see, seasoned OGs taught me that when a man possesses an unskilled mouthpiece, this causes a psychological divergence between him and the female whom he is dealing with. And this is where these arrows portrayed on this image and why they are moving in the opposite direction, signifying resistance and a reluctance from a female to co-sign and go along with what a man is presenting and advocating. For the sake of time, instead of highlighting the psychological pushback that is triggered internally when a woman is dealing with such a game-goofy individual, I'm going to highlight the psychosis that is triggered when a man has to repeatedly ask for sex. But before I do, let me explain the pay-to-play transaction that goes down when a man who falls within this category is reluctantly entertained and pat on the head by females who sparingly tolerate him and his advancements in his presence. Men who fall into these two bottom levels of the catching hand, level 1 and 2 from on this image, has a bargaining for sex kind of disposition and mindset that governs their sexual party time, underlining their involvement with the ladies. This bargaining is essential, making deals for sex. Some men do it by buying women directly expensive things. Others do it by favors, little things they hate. Others do it by just lying or just going along with whatever a woman wants. When a man acquiesces to this kind of tomfoolery, this in essence throws a shadow upon a man's masculine X factor, making him not very sexual appealing to the ladies. Hence, the title of this episode, he becomes at best tolerated and basically a bugaboo. Now, as promised early in this podcast, I mentioned this psychosis, which by the way comes about when fellas don't prescribe to a tongue is mightier than the sword mentality. But I promise to divulge how this psychosis is triggered when a man has to ask a woman repeatedly for sex. Now let me explain exactly why this is. So peep game. To gain insight and get a good hold of corrective measures, one must rise above the issue they are scrutinizing. This is why here on this channel I equate rising above a issue to thinking like a thorough chess player or a thorough poker player. For this reason, to bring clarity to this psychosis of men being overly thirsty and hounding a woman verbally for sex, and exactly why this places him at a disadvantage, then let's look no further to find the corrective measure than the ancient cosmology known as chess. An inescapable guiding principle that provides one of the key ingredients in succeeding in this life is having a mindset that recognizes both sides of the coin. As you already know, in the game of chess, the objective is to outmaneuver your opponent and checkmate their king. This is made possible if you, as a chess player, consistently keep to the forefront of your mind the importance of a both sides of the coin point of view. This plays out in chess because simultaneously each side of the coin must be taken into consideration. This has application when analyzing the chessboard, which represents the external environment, and the other side of the coin represents the chess pieces, which symbolizes the internal resources a chess player has at their disposal. All of this facilitates a chess player making the best moves so they can secure a flawless victory. This psychosis I've been mentioning on why men is at a disadvantage by hounding a woman verbally for sex. This hindrance is brought about because there is a void on understanding the magnitude on how exactly do the points surrounding the application of external and internal, and how these two terms gives a concise layout of a man's mental landscape, providing him a coherent GPS navigating system so he can better comprehend reality. Likewise, just like the importance of how these two concepts I just got through mentioning applies to the game of chess, which I explained a few moments ago, but these same two factors has a juggernaut size of importance when it comes to the art of conversation. Check out this image I'm now showing. And oh, by the way, the art of conversation, this conversational art form, where its genesis is the school of hard knocks, the streets, it is known as the gift of gab and also the art of macking. You see, a man's vocabulary is equated to his external reality, and his thoughts is equated to his internal reality, and both are connected, but they originate from two totally different mental capacities that encompasses a man's overall frame of behavior. So from a gameologist's perspective, a man's vocabulary originates from one location and his thoughts originates from another. Zero in on this brand new image I'm now showing. This diagram on the left side of this image represents the makeup of a man's psychology. Here's the deal. A man's thoughts originate out of what is referred to from the street philosophy as a man's shadow queen, his unconscious mind, which, switching back to the other image, is their internal reality as it pertains to the art of communication. Stay with me now. Going back to the diagram showcasing a man's psychology, but the use of his vocabulary, this originates from what is called a man's self-preservation mechanism, his ego, which works in tandem with his conscious intent. And switching back once again to the other image, representing the art of communication, the vocabulary is considered external within the context of the gift of gab, which also is the art of macking. By the way, I did a whole episode breaking down the importance of developing one's ego. Here's the link. Check it out once you finish viewing this episode. But a man's conscious intent and his unconscious mind are two totally different things. Look at it like this. The nature of his conscious intent, his ego, is equivalent to an active verb. This means that something is being done, activity. Remember, this is where his vocabulary originates from, whereas when it comes to his unconscious mind, his thoughts, the nature of this part of a man's makeup, look at it like this. It's a form of conditioning and a reflex. It's reactionary in its nature. Am I getting my point across? You see, you cannot improve your vocabulary without improving your thoughts. But here's the clincher. Improving and upgrading the use of one's vocabulary isn't very common, especially in the square world. But this is not the case from a street and a black cultural perspective, because you do not need to look no further to verify what I just said, other than the phenomenon known as hip-hop. Also, within the culture, another way to sharpen one's vocabulary is to play the dozens. Now, these two major factors I just got through making a distinction on. If you don't get these two straight, then you will forever be batshit crazy. But hold on, there's more. When there is a discrepancy between a man's shadow queen and his ego, his conscious intent, his vocabulary, then there will always be social anxiety associated with speaking anytime he positions himself to utilize the conscious use of his vocabulary. Then anxiety is not far behind. To further plunge into this psychosis behind men being thirsty and verbally hounding a woman for sex, when a man hasn't received the memo as to the reality that the tongue is mightier than the sword, then that part of his psychology, which is undisciplined and undeveloped, his shadow queen, will always be in conflict with his vocabulary, his ego, his conscious intent. Swinging back to the image portraying the art of communication, this external reality, which is the outward-facing representation of a man's mouthpiece. But this already conflicting scenario I just got through painting is made worse by all of the microwave ready-to-eat erroneous dating tips and corny-ass pickup lines that men is consistently collecting. And because of the convergence of all of this foolishness I just got through explaining, then the natural vibe, the magnetism that attracts and connects with a woman organically, that is the sweet spot as it is shown at the center of this image, is squandered, furthering the awkwardness that gets a man labeled a bugaboo and being just tolerated by the female he tries to interact with. Because unskilled use of one's conscious intent, their vocabulary, invites rejection. So once again, peep game. Openly getting rejected is not the coup de grace that puts a man on the bench. The rejection he fears the most because of a undisciplined shadow queen having conflict with his ego, his vocabulary, but the form of rejection he despises is the kind where he feels that the woman he is approaching or dealing with is secretly judging him. Basically, he knows within his spirit he is being tolerated and being labeled as a bugaboo. So, when there is a disconnect and a discrepancy between man's shadow queen and his ego, every time a man thinks about using his vocabulary consciously to get something from somebody, a number, a job, some meow from a female, or even a woman to stop doing something or start doing something, it feels very difficult and awkward. In a nutshell, what's happening is that subconsciously he is reminded of those times when he asked for stuff starting all the way back when he was very young and he was told no. And this conjures up all kinds of anxieties and concerns. Therefore, the very act of asking a woman for sex become associated with groveling. When you go around being thirsty and hounding women verbally for sex, this puts you in a weak and a fragile position. Modern humans have been moving across this planet for over 200,000 years. And within this 200,000 year span, there's been a whole lot of bumping and grinding going on. Sex is a cooperative exchange between a man and a woman. It is as natural as breathing. Zeroing back in on this image portraying the art of communication. When a man knows how to showcase his masculine X factor, this will automatically make him more sexually desirable to women. Then through his ego, the afterburners will be turned on and the vibe that naturally takes place between man and a woman will run its course naturally. This happens when a man is skilled at utilizing the art of communication, because this vibe that's situated at the center of this diagram, one of the ways a man can bring this into effect is when a man is able to slow down his speech. This conveys power and confidence. A lot of fast talking is an indication that he is unseasoned and doesn't have much experience. Remember, a man's X factor and that he has experiences in life is shown through his vocabulary. And this is why the development of one's game can only be accomplished under the right pressure to game ratio. I gave insight into this concept on another episode. Here's the link. Check it out once you get finished viewing this episode. Considering all of what I just got through disclosing, there should be no wavering and wobbling back and forth. I'm able to put your finger on as to exactly why hounding and verbally sweating a woman for sex makes you corny and needy. That will then firmly cement your standing as someone who is a failure and a disappointment. But like it was stated at the beginning of this podcast, there is only a chosen few, meaning that some men are born to be chosen. Some accomplish this specialty at a given point in time somewhere in their lives, but some will have this niche simply thrust upon them. Now, that's checkmate. Thanks for watching. We'll definitely catch you on the next episode.